Hi everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Today I'm going to be doing a book review of The Couple at the Table by Sophie Hannah. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books. Speaking of way too many books, I accidentally acquired another book this month, but it was a present, and it was a Valentine's present from my husband, and it was the book The Couple at the Table by Sophie Hannah. This was only released in January 2022, so I thought it would go well in my recent release book review series. This was a book I was really looking forward to the release of because I've really enjoyed Sophie Hannah's books in this series, much more so than I enjoy her standalone books and her Poirot books. So this was long awaited for me because the last time a book in this series came out was 2016, and I was not disappointed at all. I'm really happy that she's gone back to these two characters. So the two characters I'm talking about are Detective Constable Simon Waterhouse and Sergeant Charlie Zayler, who by this point in the series are married. I believe this is the 11th book in their series. I thought this series was probably called the Culver Valley series because it's set in the fictional Culver Valley. But according to Goodreads, this is actually called the Spilling Sea ID series. So, okay. So in the review today, I thought I would first of all give you a bit of a review on this book. And I've also got some other Sophie Hannah recommendations if you enjoyed this one or if you would like to read one of her earlier books. First of all, I've really enjoyed this book. I thought at the beginning that perhaps it wasn't going to be one of my favourites in the series, but as it went on, I actually really enjoyed this. I should say that this series is definitely towards the crime end of thrillers. In the earlier books, I think they were sort of split between characters to whom things were happening and Charlie and Simon investigating, and there is also a further team of characters, all of whom I really enjoy reading about too. So the earlier books in this series I think were definitely more crime, and as the series went on I think there is a bit of a psychological thriller element as well, and I definitely think in this book, which Sophie Hannah's obviously had a break from this series to write standalones, which are most of her standalones I would describe as out and out psychological thrillers, and she's also written several Hercule Poirot continuation novels. She's written 4 of those, and I think in this book I could really see the influence of both of those two genres. So this one very much has a mystery at the heart of it, and in that way I think has been influenced by her writing about Poirot. The parts of this that are told by some of the characters involved in the mystery are very much give you a vibe of psychological thriller. Although Charlie and Simon do appear in this, I wouldn't say it's their most involved that they've ever been in one of these cases. But I did enjoy their appearance, and it's really nice to revisit a group of characters that you feel invested in. So that was one of the things I really liked about the book. But also, I think that my only negative about this book was that at the beginning I thought that it wasn't as much like the other ones in the series as I wanted it to be, but as it went on it did remind me more of the rest of the series, and it reminded me that I actually haven't read the rest of the series for a long time and would like to revisit some of them, so that's a good thing too. Yeah, so what do I think Sophie Hannah did really well here? So there was a really baffling closed circle mystery at the heart of this, which I loved. Love a closed circle mystery. This is a seemingly impossible case. It's kind of told to us in 2 timelines. So we've got the timeline of Charlie and Simon go on a holiday to a couple's resort in the Culver Valley, and they end up first-hand at a crime scene when one of the guests is murdered. We do see the timeline of that day, that week when the murder happened, but the rest of this is taking place about 6 months later in January 2020, when Simon has failed to solve the case and is still obsessed with it 6 months later. Also still obsessed with it is one of the key protagonists, who is called Lucy, and Lucy was married to the only man who was in the room when this person was killed, and the person who was killed is the woman who cheated on her husband with her. So Lucy does look like the most likely suspect, so naturally she wants this case solved. Unfortunately, the case seems pretty impossible because everybody has an alibi, and there's also some forensics that prove that certain things couldn't have been possible. So it's got a really interesting sort of impenetrable murder. But of course, Simon continues to investigate. Charlie helps out, mainly through her conversations with sort of existing characters in the series, but also with Lucy. And I really did enjoy the parts of the book where Charlie Zayler was speaking with Lucy. They were really interesting. I also always love in these books how different Charlie and Simon are from each other. I've no idea how these two have ended up married because they are like worlds apart, but obviously they love each other, so that's good. And I really enjoyed some of the interaction between them in this book as well, and hearing some of Charlie's inner thoughts, which are always interesting. I don't think they are a couple who would be everybody's cup of tea, but for me, I really enjoy reading about them, and a lot of that fondness comes from the previous books in the series. There is one thing in this that has happened with the group of characters that I think is a bit silly and far-fetched, but Hannah does actually rectify that in this book. So yeah, what else did I love about the couple at the table? It's got a really interesting closed circle group of characters, and all of the characters in it do get at least a chapter where we sort of get a glimpse into their life, and I liked the way Sophie Hannah did that and gave us multiple perspectives, and as well as the two timelines. This is a really enjoyable book, and I felt like the time that I spent with it was very entertaining and very gripping. If you like sort of crime, psychological thrillers, but definitely closed circle mysteries, I think this is a book that you would really enjoy and would struggle to put down. So let's talk about other Sophie Hannah books that I think would be good for you if you haven't read anything in the Culver Valley series yet. Just a caveat, I'm not going to recommend any of her standalone books here because I am not the biggest fan of her standalone books. And that is just my opinion. I know that a lot of people have enjoyed these. The standalones were such a departure, I think, from her crime series, which I had loved, that they just don't particularly do anything for me. So my recommendations are all going to be within the series I'm talking about. So this Spilling CID series, or Culver Valley series as I call it, actually begins with the book Little Face, which I personally didn't particularly enjoy, but I didn't read this one first. So I'm not going to recommend Little Face, but just to let you know that this is book one in the series. So my recommendations in the Spilling CID series would be, so these are some of the ones that I've enjoyed the most. The second book in the series is called Hurting Distance, and this features a character called Naomi who something terrible has happened to Naomi and she's never told anyone about it, and she now has a new secret about a lover, and her lover has vanished. So Naomi is worried he's come to harm, and she seeks help from the police, but they're not convinced because his wife insists he's not missing. I didn't read these books in order, but I enjoyed this one a lot more than Little Face, and this is when I really started to enjoy the characters of Simon and Charlie, who are fantastically written. So yeah, I would recommend Hurting Distance. My other favourites in the series, this probably is my favourite, The Other Half Lives, but I think that's because I've got a fondness for it because I started with this one, and this is actually book 4 in the series, and this is a really mysterious one with a tagline, "Why would anyone confess to the murder of someone who isn't dead?" And in this one, I seem to remember there is a lot of really good storyline with Charlie and Simon, And there's a really interesting storyline about a character called Ruth who's trying to rebuild her life after doing something she regrets. What I love about this series is that they do kind of alternate between a main character in that individual standalone book and between the police characters. So if you're not a huge fan of like a police crime thriller, I think these strike quite a good balance between the sort of psychological element with the other characters, and you also get quite a lot of the personal life of Charlie and Simon. So yeah, I think these strike a really good balance between crime and psychological thriller. The other two books I couldn't choose between that I would recommend from this series are Lasting Damage and Kind of Cruel. I think these both come slightly later in the series, but Lasting Damage is a really fascinating one in that it involves a character called Connie who's looking at a virtual tour on a real estate website. And she thinks that she sees in the virtual tour a dead body in the house, but no one believes her, and when she goes back on it, it's not there. So this is a classic case of somebody not being believed. This is quite a theme running through Sophie Hannah's work, I would say. People who are not believed by police, not believed by their partners, and how that turns out. So this one was one that I definitely remember really enjoying. And Kind of Cruel, I think, is one where I really enjoyed Simon and Charlie's storyline. There are plenty of other books in this series that you could also pick up. These were just a selection of ones that I've really enjoyed. So I hope you've enjoyed this review today. I think it's probably been a bit rambly, but I really enjoy the books of Sophie Hannah on the whole, and I especially enjoy this Spilling CID series. So if you are a fan of crime and psychological thriller, do go and pick up a Charlie and Simon book from this series, and I highly, highly recommend her latest, The Couple at the Table. If you have enjoyed this review today, please do give it a like. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. This is the second in my series of recent release reviews. I will link the other one here. It's also for a sort of psychological thriller by Nikki French. So I recommend you check that out if you're looking for psychological thrillers. Please let me know in the comments if you've read any Sophie Hannah books and which ones you particularly enjoyed. Do you like the characters of Simon and Charlie if you've read them? If you haven't read them, do you think you'll pick up any of these books? I'd love to hear from you, and I hope to see you all again soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.